Chromebook? It doesn't need anything in it right now, but in a bit, would you?
Hello, everyone. It's Sir Rithkin from Ontier with the Murder of Dukes interview with Duke Hrorek Wolfson from the Outlands. Thank you, Your Grace, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. And I apologize to everyone for running a little late, but I think it's going to be worth it because we got the pictures together, and it's always cool when there's photos. And to help us with the photos tonight, my sister's sitting in. So welcome, Ashaxi. Thank you for co-hosting tonight. So, Your Grace, you've seen some of these before, I think, so you know that we usually start with your origin story. So if you want to start there, that would be great.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. So, like a lot of the guys that you have interviewed so far, I started in the mid 80s. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is the barony of Alberon. And I was going to school here after having moved from another town and ran into this guy at school named Kevin Roderick, and we became friends that summer. And then I had to move back up to Anchorage, and he had told me about this thing called the SCA, and it was everything I had ever dreamed of from the moment I read or probably The Hobbit. I think it was about 8 years old, right? And so came back down that next summer, and Kev said, all right, well, let's go to the park and we'll check it out. And he told a bit of this story. Of course, we go to the first park and it's not there. We go to the second park and it's an Arts in the Parks demo that our barony is participating in. And we're watching the fighting, and we go and we talk to these two guys, and we're like, hey, this is what we've been looking for all our lives. We'd like to join. And these two gentlemen, one being Boomvault, who was king of the Outlands at the time, and another guy who is somebody you may have heard of named Argon Skullcrusher. They said, okay, well, why don't you go talk to those guys over there? And they pointed across the field, and there was this crazy, tall, blonde-haired guy named Christopheles de Clueless, right? We had good names in the Outlands back then. So anyway, Christopheles de Clueless was a in and out member of a household called the Crimson Company that was based on the Gore novels and was a mercenary household and had slaves and all this stuff. Anyway, so we could have started along the path to righteousness from the get-go, but maybe it was wisdom, maybe it was folly. They sent us to be raised by the wolves, as it were. And so we went not too many weeks afterwards. We had gone and bought leather and bought a helmet that we shared, and actually really, I think Kev really bought the helmet. And anyway, we both made armor, but Kevin was helping me with my paper route, and we did it on bicycles, and endoed on his bike and broke his wrist. So right after we joined and got our stuff all together, he broke his wrist. And so I got the helmet pretty much, and we went to our first event, which was this crazy, amazing thing called Lonely Mountain that he talked about. So it's way up in the mountains, and we had this giant load of stuff in the truck, and Christopheles told me that I had to watch the tire. There was a tire on the tarp holding it all down. And so anyway, tire came off, went off the truck, off the side of the road, down the ravine, like 100 yards down into the ravine, down to the bottom, into the creek. So of course, because that was my job, Clue sent me down to get the tire. Went down, got the tire, lugged it all the way back up. We went to the event. Anyway, so my name when I began in the SCA was Jason of the Creek because the tire. Right? So that's essentially the origin story. We pretty much just spent all our free time trying to play SCA from that point on. But it was pretty fringy. The Crimson Company had a couple of nights, but um, it was a mercenary household. We hired out to do Aiden Belt one year against the Kingdom of the Outlands. Um, and ironically enough, it just so we hired out to him, and there was at the time the Outlands was in an incredible phase of kind of turmoil, and the king at the time was a guy named Hagen Silverskull, and so I killed him in the open field battle at Estrella, and I came off the field very impressed with myself, and was just bragging up a storm, and I ran into Leaf, Duke Leaf, who was just Leaf at the time. Um, and of course, he told me, "Hey, man, maybe you should not be talking so much." So anyway, I guess the point of all that was that we had a very interesting beginning. We we started off a place that was not very SCA, and well, I haven't traveled the same kind of path that Rothgar has, of course. Um, it's definitely a different place we ended up in.
So,
I kind of wish that I could see the pictures right now, but
oh, you want to look at some of the
well, it's
pictures?
saying my internet is unstable.
Okay. Well, are you ready, Ashaxi, for pictures? You're muted. Okay, there we go.
Wow. Okay, so that picture itself was probably about 1988, 89. The tabard I'm wearing was made for me by Mistress Jean. It is part Albron, part Outlands, and I think that she made it for me at Penzic. It's kind of a funny thing because being in the household, the Crimson Company, of course, they wore a lot of red. Well, I ended up there for several years where there are all these pictures of me, or at least were at the time, of me being in green tunics in the midst of the Crimson Company. Well, the funny thing about that is that I'm slightly red green colorblind, right? And so it became a joke that grew and grew and grew over the years. So when I reigned the second time, I told them right after I won Crown that I was going to go mad and that I would try and be as reverent as possible, but they should expect the unexpected. So I did this whole thing where I decided because Outland was going to war that we should change to a more warlike colors since the Outlands, it's a white stag leaping on a green field, and I didn't think that was aggressive enough. So anyway, we did this whole thing where I created the Minister of Hues, and so this kind man, Sir Barold, agreed to help me out with it. I picked him because he was just an excellent straight man. But it turns out that he is actually fully colorblind. And so basically all the shtick was that, we would review the changes that were being made and so on and so forth. And of course, we didn't change anything. Of course, you can't just change the kingdom colors. That would be crazy, right? But so anyway, if you look around a little bit in the background here, you'll see some different things. There's a banner and I think a tabard that have either the Outlands King's Arms or the Outlands Kingdom Arms, but they are on red instead of green. So that's one of the things that kind of ties into my origin story.
Awesome. Do you want me to continue and do you want the
Oh
next
yeah,
picture?
please
Okay.
don't stop because, like I was saying before, there's a lengthy story probably for every single one of these pictures, and we
I
should
can't
just
get it to
not
move.
do them all.
There we go.
So that's me and
Okay.
Jax at Estrella, not too long after being knighted.
Awesome.
Yep. So Jax and I, okay, um, we had a really powerful relationship. Jax and I, there's me and my first queen, Keelan. Anyway, so Jax and I were sword brothers for a long time. We basically worked together, fought together, partied together, all the things. And so, as he told the story, when it came time for us to potentially be offered knighthood, the legend is that, they couldn't offer to one of us for fear of basically driving the other one to madness, right? So they knighted us both simultaneous. And the cool thing about that is that my knight, Sir Richard, Sir Richard of Wolfwood, greatest knight in all the known world, um, and his sword brother, Sir Roderick of Mandrake Hill, were knighted uh, together as well. So there's sort of a lineage thing there. And it was kind of cool because in the Outlands, we have two weapons of state as opposed to just one. We have a sword, lightning, and we have an axe, thunder. The thunder is what the warlord bears. Anyway, so Jax was knighted with the axe, and I was knighted with the sword. As far as the dubbing went,
That's really cool.
yeah. And then of course, and there's a big old stripe across Jax's back from one of our Shere Khan tournaments. Uh, as you know, we're in a household called the Brotherhood of the Bengal, which has gotten to be a kind of a big deal. And we will have a tournament to decide our leader, and it's called the Shere Khan tournament. And this is a picture from the year that I won Shere Khan, which was the year that I won my first crown. There was kind of a thing there for a while where basically if you won Shere Khan, you subsequently won the following crown.
Very cool.
I and so this this is one of my favorite photos. So the guy on the left is Conan, and I don't know if you guys have interviewed him yet. I don't think you have. I hope you get to because he's a pretty amazing guy, and of course he was a complete phenom as a fighter. And this is me hitting him with a really nice right cross right in the chops. And so that's something I'm proud of because he is a truly great fighter. I have my moments. He's a great fighter.
So, how did you end up with your knight? How did you guys end up in a relationship?
Um, good fortune, the grace of the gods. Basically, what kind of happened was Richard and Roderick had come to Outlandish. Actually, in I think me and Kevin's first year of the SCA with William of Batavia, who was King of Calontir at the time, and um, that kind of this Calontir Outlands cross-cultural like exchange program. So they moved out here not too long after that, and they brought in an amazing cultural change to us. Um, Things like period footwear and uh, the center grip round and fighting with pole arms. And actually, that's not true because Rolling Thunder was a big household here, and they're at least they were at the time, a very polearm oriented unit. But yeah, so I ran into Richard kind of along the way. I think the first time I met him at Outlandish was a tournament, and he beat me up. But then I kept having contact with him because some friends of mine and I were traveling a lot, and we'd gone out to Lily's War, and kind of ran into those guys there. And so basically, I set my cap on Sir Richard and decided that I was not going to take no for an answer. And, he took me with him one summer, and we went to Lily's War and Penzic and all this stuff. Basically, he was kind of measuring me, I think, to see if I was going to be someone who wasn't going to drive him insane. So this picture is on the left, Sir Nikolai the Desert Rat, and on the right, Christopheles the Clueless. So those guys were some of my earliest mentors in the SCA. Nikolai is actually a nuclear physicist,
Wow.
and Clue is just a mad genius.
Very
But
cool.
anyway, well, that totally derailed me.
Sorry.
Damn it.
You want the next
This is
picture?
going to happen again. So you guys are going to have to keep track of what I was talking about, okay?
Okay. Ripken's really good at that.
So what was I talking about?
You were talking about how you and your knight got together.
Right. Okay. So yeah, he took me to Lily's and Penzic and stuff like that, and I actually ended up getting squired at Outlandish, and it was definitely one of those things where, not that Richard isn't one of the greater fighters I've ever met. He's an amazing polearm fighter. He's not a tourney guy just because he doesn't care to be. But it was one of those situations because by that time, I'd been in the SCA, I think 4 years or something like that, and I knew everything already. And of course, I was probably one of the greatest fighters of all time at that point. And so he couldn't therefore teach me anything about fighting, but he taught me everything else about um, the the diversity that is expected of a peer, and just actual appreciation for those sorts of things, because I love medieval things and fantasy and swords and all that stuff, but I was not a history nerd so much as one of those guys who needed a physical outlet in a lot of ways, and loved to fight, loved to fight.
So,
So I needed that kind of night.
so did squiring to him sort of take you out of the fringe?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was it was a big deal because not that the Crimson Company isn't a great group of people, and that they didn't shape a lot of what is me, but they didn't play Kingdom or SCA. They played baronial household stuff. And it was great as a 15, 16, 17-year old who just wanted to come and, party and kick ass. And, it's very Cobra Kai. Right? But so we evolved. I wanted different things. And so ended the Crimson Company. One of the things they're famous for is a thing called Crimson Hill. Richard camped at the bottom of the hill. And while he was greatly esteemed by the Crimson Company, they would call him Sloper and so on and so forth. So there's a kind of a symbolic thing where I moved down to the bottom of the hill with Richard, and so did Rothgar and a couple other folks like that. And so we kind of moved on, you know.
Little writing.
And yeah, yeah.
Very cool.
Definitely.
Right, I'll pull up another picture.
I'm sorry, what was that you were muttering about?
I said I will pull up another picture.
Because dukes are hard of hearing and such. All right, this is kind of just a random photo in a way, but it's a great picture of Callantyr in the Outlands at that was back at Estrella Mountain Park, and that's I think Aaron Glenn is Prince of Callantyr, and his princess Alethea, who's actually an incredible scribe who did one of my favorite pieces of one of my artifacts. It's my Huskarl scroll. And then on the left, you'll see the Outlands, and I believe that's Malguin as king, and maybe Haroon on the left. Anyway, great photo. I do miss the open field or the broken field of Estrella. So this is a great black and white action photo. I think that's Jax on the left and the Black Duke on the right. And so there's just so much goodness there. It's the dichotomy, the Black Duke in white and Jax in black, and you know it just captures motion, and that is also from our Shira Khan tournament. You see basically a bunch of dudes in a line back down behind them, and the way we were doing it is kind of matched weapons, and we're all squared off, and then we would rotate. It was all round robin. It was a long day. All right, so this is actually a sacred thing. I have not ever shown this photo publicly before. It was a household treasure. So on the right is our buddy Loke, Duke Lycurgus, who who you've heard a lot of people talk about, for better or for worse. And on the left is Jax, and I don't know if there's any place where I've ever seen Jax look so happy in all my life.
I think he has my favorite name in the SCA. I just love his name.
Jax?
Yeah.
Darius of Jax Sardes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he chose well. So that's a picture of Jax back in the day when we were actually, I don't think that I might have been a squire. He wasn't. This is right after he quit Jaeger House and formed the Brotherhood.
Was he a chef?
So, yeah. I was actually the first person to join the Brotherhood that wasn't in Jaeger House prior to that. There were 6 of them, I think, and then I was the 7th. And then it grew and grew and grew.
And it's huge now.
It is. So we have this thing where, yeah.
I'm going the wrong way. Sorry.
We have this thing where we rumble people in, right? After we've prospected you and decided that you're one of us, you have to rumble in, or you can represent somebody to be rumbled in, essentially. And the way that works is you fight the Shira Khan 3 times, once for honor, twice for courage, 3 times for brotherhood. And then after that, the Brotherhood jumps you, and they make 3 passes at you, right? And so basically, you are expected to not lose your feet. You don't have to take shots. You are supposed to not fall down, and you're supposed to fight back. And and then that's 3 passes as well. So hopefully, God willing, it made the mix, because it's one of my favorite photos of all time. one person and one person only has ever won the rumbling, and that's Tamiki.
Oh.
So we rumbled him at Lily's, and we were already pretty good then. You know, it was Jax and I and Gilly and a couple other stout fighters. But so Tamiki had a great sword, and there's a picture in there somewhere of me where I'm not fighting with it, but I have a round a round shield and a sword, and I'm folded over Tamiki's head and shoulder as he's basically launching me through the air. Um,
Do you want me to look
that
for it?
it'll come up. So anyway, that's I think I would call that a Fabio pick. I had a thing where I don't know if it was just because I wasn't very good at sewing. All my tunics had really big neck holes, or if it was because I have a really big head. But
Or
I always
sexy
had one
shoulders.
shoulder hanging out, right? And it was bait, and it worked for a lot of people. But I remember there's a guy named Ivan the Illustrator, who's a Duke of Kaid, who warned me one time that my shoulder was hanging out and it looked juicy. And of course, in my arrogance, I scoffed, and he hurt me. He's a big, strong man.
Yeah.
That's Loke from Estrella. I think it's actually an Outlands prize, and can't remember who the mid-realm knight was. They fight that crazy bunny ears Florentine style with the center slot open. That's weird. Anyway,
That's weird.
probably said too much. So that is a picture of my knight, Sir Richard of Wolfwood, and that sort of thing is probably why they call him the Saxon Don Juan.
I can see that.
Nice. Nice.
All right, so that's His Majesty Hogarden giving Jax an award. I can't remember which, and that was during Jax's ill-advised yellow hair phase, right around the time of his first reign.
We've all made hair choices that we've lived to regret.
Oh, wow. Right in succession. Jax. So I have a couple of photos in this mix that are like famous people who maybe messed up. And that's a classic. Jax, I love you, bro. The rest are really flattering, I promise. That's kind of a random pick from when I was king the first time at Estrella. Has Loke on the right in the frame. It was a long time ago. I don't remember what I was saying. That's another great picture of Jax. Jax has actually gotten more photogenic as time has gone on, like myself in some ways. But for some reason, a lot of the best pictures of Jax that I have are from this weekend. This is another one of those pictures from that ShareCon. Okay, so this is me when I was 16. It was probably my first real garb. It was made by my mom, who is an awesome seamstress and made all this possible, as it were. And so the cape that I'm wearing actually was a skirt. It's like a full circle skirt, and it's velvet on the outside, and like, was it pink taffeta on the inside? I don't know. See, this is the funny thing about being colorblind. Sometimes gray and pink, you can't tell the difference. So she probably told me it was gray. And so this is Kevin. Okay, the guy on the right was one of our friends from high school, Chris. He didn't play SCA, but he was a buddy. So the next photo is Kevin and I, Rothgar and I, the summer that we met in '85, I guess it was, when we were in 8th grade.
Wow.
right?
Adorable.
Did you say horrible or
Adorable.
Adorable.
Because it's certainly both.
Oh, no, I don't think it's horrible at all. I think it's adorable.
If you like dimples.
Well, who doesn't like
Right.
dimples?
True. So another picture of Loke, my man.
It's a great
The,
photo.
the Duke l'Orange.
So I have a question for you, and you can answer it while we're still looking through the pictures. But you were knighted in '95, and then you won your first crown like 10 years later. Was crown something you were chasing, or did you decide not to go for crown until then?
Oh no, I had the entire thing totally planned out from the second when I met Gunvald and Arton in the park. It was precisely what I had planned.
Okay, well,
No, actually, really, it was one of those things where, um, without being immodest, I probably could have won crown from about the time I was, depending on the list, of course, 18 or 19 on. If it was just based on swinging the stick, of course, which it is not. Um, but thank God I didn't find anybody to fight for, or basically, I was kind of a deadbeat vagabond stick jock, so I had no business being king. Um, but by the time that I fought, uh, I was married. I had kind of grown up. Um, I had almost fought for some people a couple of times. I almost fought for Her Grace Catherine. I almost fought for Monica von Zell, who is Johann's mom. And there were a couple of things like that. But once again, thank God I didn't manage to get that together. So when I finally did fight, it was an interesting thing because I'd kind of faded out a little bit in my participation. But like Kevin and I had always talked about wanting to win our first crown and stuff like that. And that's not not an uncommon thing, of course. But anyway, so one night I had a dream. And in the dream, I was talking to Elijah Tinker. And we were at the old Outlandish site. And we were talking about the fact that I had won my first crown tournament and how, it was a realization of a dream and blah, 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 and how cool it was. So basically, then I woke up and started training. And I trained for, I don't know, 3, 4 months or something like that. And then Crown Tournament was actually on our anniversary weekend. So I, at that point, made my then wife Princess on our anniversary weekend. And she was an AOA queen. So that was an amazing experience. And she did a phenomenal job.
that's
Yeah,
cool. So you had the
things.
noodle dream and you went for it.
Oh yeah, I mean, and one of the things we talked about a little bit before we actually managed to get on camera was that the thing that I think is amazing about me in any way really is the journey that I've had, and that's an amazing thing. I literally had a dream about the thing and then went and did it, right? And then, so that was an incredible experience. And as luck would have it, in that crown, I fought Jax in the finals of it. And funny story about that, many, many years later, not too long after I won crown this last time, Slane and I and Jax are hanging out and we're talking about the old days. And he's like, so who did you fight in the finals when you won the first time anyway? And it was actually a text conversation, I think it was. And Slane sends him a picture back of basically the end of the tournament, him on his knees and me extending my hand.
He had blacked it out.
Yeah. Well, he was having a hard time then. You know, we all have gone through our phases in our life, and that was a hard stretch for him. So it was interesting because there's kind of a tradition in the Outlands that's gone off and on where, um, well, it used to be more than kind of a tradition, but basically, if the King's champion was the guy who came in second place, right? So of course, when I fought Jax in the finals, and I won, I was like, hey, well, so do you want to be my champion? And he was kind of burned out and not ready to do it at the time, so he declined, and I made then Duke Searith my champion because he, if nothing else, is a really good champion to have if you're to choose one, but also Slane's husband. Slane was my squire and was our basically our chatelaine. So so yeah, it was interesting the whole thing with Jax in that tournament. That was an amazing tournament. I fought Hans in that tournament. I think in like the quarterfinals or something, and it was a good day. And this is where you guys subtly remind me of what I was talking about before you asked the question.
You were going to talk to us about this picture.
Oh. Of course. So that's another picture of Logan. This is his Captain America outfit. I don't know how closely you can see it. But yeah, it's stars and stripes, and you know, he's the picture of modesty is
In the big heroic pose.
yes, yes. Um, so that's a picture from not too long after I was a squire. It's just a fun melee. I think I like the angle of things, and it's kind of neat because actually uh, all those guys were on the other team, and I ended up.
Which one's you?
Which one's me? Well, the one who's winning, of course. No, the red guy with his back to us. So you know, and it's kind of a funny shot too. You guys know Germanicus, Sir Germanicus? He was in Outlands Knight. He's a youngster who just got knighted within the last year and a half or so, I think. Anyway, so he wears kidney belt still, and he looks tiny, and it's shocking to me that the two same people could possibly have worn that thing. Because I mean, I don't know if it would fit on my leg now. Morlock, I think he lost that fight actually, which didn't happen very often with that guy when he wanted to win. More fight mode. That was from that Shere Khan tournament weekend. I like that one because we're both fighting sword and axe, and that's one of those things where he's he fought one sword up, one sword down, and he was really good at it. And so I think he really should have been killing me in that photo, but he must have missed or something. I don't know. But it's got got good movement to it.
It really
The lady
does.
who took these pictures is a professional camera woman in the movie industry, so that's why they're so excellent.
Do you have them framed like in your house?
A lot of them, yeah. There are a few that I actually put back into the mix here that are, you know, the ones that are really meaningful to me. That one actually is the person on the left swinging is actually Slain in her first suit of armor
Oh wow.
before she became my squire. So uh Slain is a huge, huge part of my journey. She, of course, is uh, married to Sirith, and they essentially moved back kind of into the Alberon area after having been in Las Vegas and a couple other things. She had played a little bit, but not a ton. He was already a Duke. And so she, anyway, so she decided that I was to be her knight, no matter what. The only problem with that was that at the time, my belt was in abeyance.
Oh,
I had had this. I had had a fit. We were going through some really difficult issues in the kingdom at the time, and they were things uh, that were household issues as well. So basically, a king was being put in a position where he was going to have to kind of destroy his former knight without naming any name, and not necessarily unjustly so, which made it all the harder. But it was a really hard time. And unfortunately, it resulted in me becoming entirely disillusioned. And so basically, we're at a big event, and I stood up in the middle of the belted circle and threw my stuff down and walked out. And of course, probably the first person to see me after I walked out of that belted circle was my heir, Devin Drakeson, who had not actually been a squire too very long at that point. And he kind of chased me down. I finally squired him, and then like maybe 6 months later, threw my stuff down in a fit, and my belt was in abeyance for a couple of years. And so then Slane and Sirith moved to Albuquerque, and I'm starting to go to events a little bit because I need to fight, you know. And she decides that I am going to be her knight, and they become friends of the family. We hang out. We're having a great summer, and there's this wonderful event called Lonely Mountain that you've heard of. And so she says, "Well, don't worry about setting your tent up. We'll take it up, and just come up when you're done with work." So I get there, and we talked about favorite pieces of regalia and stuff. Where is it? Anyway, somewhere here is Delta. So I get there, and across the door of my tent is this shiny white belt and this beautiful pouch. And so, I mean, I was still in mundanes and I had to get dressed, right? She kind of put me on the spot. And so basically, um, then Jack uh, took me to speak with the king, was Iril, and Iril decided that I should take my belt back, and so I took my belt and chain back then. And of course, that started the next big stink because I didn't do a quest or a penance or 40 lashes or anything like that. So, um, it was out of the frying pan into the fire kind of a thing. But so I became Slane's Knight, and she's been teaching me how to be a better person ever since.
That's really
When
cool. So she made you the belt.
she had a hand in it. She made the belt and did some of the painting and stuff. She is an amazing lady, but she's not a maker of things except maybe beautiful children. um, so, but that is only the tip of the iceberg as far as the Slane story goes. So, um, she is my chatelaine or the leader of the royal household during my reign. Uh, and then not too long after that, right, I, I guess during my first reign, we found out we were going to have my first son, right? So right after the rain, my son Nathan is born, and so there's a little bit less participation there for a while. I start participating again. Our barony goes through a transition, and so basically, Slane and I become Baron and Baroness of Alberon, which was an incredible thing. But and this is one of the great pitfalls of my life. One of the tragic moments. Um, I was unfaithful to my wife and destroyed my marriage, and so I stepped down from being Baron. With I think I only did maybe a little more than a year of a 2-year term, right? And so, and basically just abdicated, left her holding the bag, and because not only is she my partner and a friend at the time, but a friend, just took it. And so, um, of course, I felt pretty bad about that for a long time, still do. But the great part is, many years later, I'm hanging out with Duke Sirith, work together, and we're talking about Crown Tournament. And I'm getting to be a pretty old dude, and I don't want to be a fluke. I want to be a Duke. And and so we're talking about consort, and he says, "Well, you can fight for Slane as long as you make her the Red Duchess." And as you ladies know, um, there's this tradition with colors in the Outlands, with the Dukes. Well, Slane is the only Duchess with a color, right? Slane reigned the first time with Ulrich, who was Sirith's squire. So anyway, the point of all that really was that, um, being able to fight for her in Crown was um, was a chance at redemption. And so it is another incredibly magical, powerful thing that I was successful in that endeavor and was able to make her queen and subsequently the Red Duchess. And if I worked really hard every day for the rest of my life, I might be able to pay her back for all the other stuff she's done for me.
And you guys
So
just
anyway,
just reigned like a couple years ago, right?
yeah, I was one of those guys who had a big old gap. I think my first reign was, I think it was 35, 30, 35, something like that. So I've done one in my 30s, one in my 40s. I would really like to do one more, and I guess it would be in my 50s then.
Got to show your longevity.
Right. Well, see, I'm I'm taking the Michael Jordan approach. Not that I am drawing any other comparisons, but that if you take a break every once in a while, like, I would have to say, probably one of the things that is responsible for the relatively good condition of my body right now, having fought for 30 plus years, is probably the two-year breaks that I took, you know? And I've had a couple of things where there was a point where I tore my one of my right tricep, and so I fought left-handed for a year and stuff like that. But um, the whole throw less shots thing that Sean talks about, I think there's something to that.
Something about conserving energy in the fight, right?
Yeah. Well, and especially because I had been I'd been a combination fighter too. I started out as a 16-year-old kid, and I weighed 175 pounds, and I was fighting a bunch of big, really mean, hairy, mean guys, and so I was a runaway fighter, you know. And then eventually, at some point in my late 20s, early 30s, I realized that I had developed some power and stuff like that, and so I became more of a stand in the pocket and throw the windshield wiper of doom kind of guy, you know. And and then for this last crown, I really concentrated on trying to win the fight with my feet and fighting it at the outside extent of the range first, as opposed to letting everybody come into the pocket because that's what I like to do, you know. And so it made a big difference, really
So
big difference.
because you're in the Outlands, I have to ask you: did you win your crowns, Sword and Shield, or did you fight Madhu? Or
Um, the first crown I fought all sword and shield. Um, that one I fought basically it was a 2x3 strap-on heater, you know, classic of the style that was handed down to us from Aidenveld, pretty much. um, my second crown I fought with a 2x3 center grip scutum, and I also fought some sword and axe in that too. Sword and axe Florentine, that is.
cool. I'm sorry, you should show the pictures, like Shaxi, but I just want you guys to know I keep putting myself on mute because my dog is right next to me and she's snoring really loud. So that's why.
Is that what that noise is?
That's okay.
Yes, my dog is snoring like into the microphone. I apologize.
Oh, it looks like I just lost. Okay, I just lost the slideshow, so we'll have to pull it up again. I'm
That's
sorry.
right. All right. So let's see. What was I talking about again? We had just talked about Slain, and of course I could go on and on. Okay, so that's an old photo from a Christina Defender tournament, which was sort of a local thing. That is from left to right: Earl Cameron, myself, Duke Leaf, Earl Cathan, and a gentleman by the name of Sir Lancelot Dupont. Another great Outlands name from the days of yore. So the guys in the Crimson Company that were kind of predated us, we had good names when I joined the Crimson Company. Like there was Sir Nikolai the Desert Rat, like I told you about, and Sir Matthew the Merciless, and oh, let's see, we had a guy named that was Baracus the Spartan. But the guys before that were Sir Montegar of Hellhole and Sir Tarlock von Bold. And, I mean, it was a crazy time. There was a guy in Rolling Thunder that was a local guy, a Duke. He was an Aiden Duke, actually, but his name was Duke Heinrich Armpitsbane.
No.
Yeah.
I kind of like the hellhole one myself, but
Right? Sir Montegar of Hellhole. He's a bad man too. He was a Navy pilot. Yeah.
you just can't get away with those anymore.
No, not so much. And see, I've had that's another interesting journey I've had is heraldically. Um, I think I've submitted at least 3 devices. The first one I I think I had in submission or was about to submit right when oh God, North Shield became a principality, I want to say, and I had an escarbuncle that I really wanted to use, and then that was not an option anymore. And then after that, for my first crown, I submitted another device, and it was a can't remember the blazon, but it was a chargeless field, and so it was heraldically correct, but sort of out of the box a bit, as it were, and they didn't like it, so that got booted. And then, of course, I had to submit a third device to fight in the next crown, and I finally did get something passed, but it was not what I submitted. But I'm a Vikings heraldry.
Hey, Shaxi, can you make those pictures bigger?
Um, this.
No.
Wait.
It was a good photo, though. I mean,
while
so
she
tell me a
fixes
little
the
bit
photos.
about what I wanted to talk about her garment behind her. So on the left behind you, there's an amazing piece of work, and there's trim or applique, looks like down the center of it.
This,
right?
which one? This
And
one?
then you have another one that was,
It's the fighting one.
yeah, that's a fighting tunic?
That's the fighting outfit I just made my husband. There's the pants and the coat.
Wow.
He's a lucky dude.
Well, bravo. Yes, he's a lucky dude. That I was just talking with somebody about that the other day, and I was wondering what the culture was actually.
Scythian.
Ah, cool.
Yep.
Jax's original persona was Scythian.
That's what my laurel is for.
Before he. Oh, really? Yeah, he went Roman. He was originally. Yeah, he was still Darius of Jaxartes, but it was earlier by a bit.
Yeah.
We're gonna try this. Yeah, I'll take care of the photos. It'll be fine.
I really appreciate it.
That's a good one.
There. Is that bigger?
No. You didn't do anything.
All right, so let's see. I'll talk about this photo a little bit. So
Okay.
if you look at Cathan, who is the gentleman second from the left.
Yeah, he lives up in Ontier now.
Yeah. There's a medallion around his chest. That is what is known as the first blade medallion. Because we were all in the Crimson Company at the time, we had a yearly thing that was, to decide the theoretical leader of the household, and it was a no rules tournament. And Rothgar talked about it a little bit. And, I mean, for the most part, it was fairly civilized with some grappling, but occasionally not so much. So, yeah, that
So
was, I'm sorry, what?
I have to stop sharing again because what I'm seeing on my screen is not what everybody else is seeing. So I don't know what's going on.
It's the same picture of the guys.
Right. I'm seeing another picture of someone. I'm seeing something completely different from what you guys are seeing.
I think you're sharing the wrong window.
Right. So I'm closing windows now. Sorry.
Can't follow. So I'm sorry. Continue, please.
Oh, well, okay.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, so I was talking about the first blade medallion. So it was a no rules thing, and so it was kind of a big deal for Kevin and I at that time because we were fighting men. We were both 16, 17 when we joined, and so when the first time I won it, I think I was 18 or something like that, and mostly it was because I was quicker than people, and it wasn't I don't think I had to wrestle anybody. Although the day before, so it was held at Sir Matthew the Merciless's house. This tournament was this time, which is about 35 miles outside of Albuquerque. Sir Nikolai asked me the day before if I wanted to ride bikes with him out to Sir Matthew's house. And I'm like, okay, that sounds fun. So Nick had a pretty good bike, and I had a really bad bike, and it was incredibly brutal bike ride. We actually walked our bikes for about the last 2 miles, and Nick was incredible shape at the time. He's a water polo player. That's a good one, a Johan right there.
Okay.
So anyway, Nikolai tried to set me up and nearly killed me. My legs were almost solid like stone the next day. I just could barely walk, but I ended up uh, thwarting his designs, and that one is not too long after I really kind of made my first set of armor, in the sense that like I really put some effort to the crafting of it. The lamellar is all um, lacquered and painted on the edges, and of course it was about a almost 3/8 inch thick, and each one has 7 holes, and it was a single hole punch, and so, oh my God, it was an awful process. And I'm sure that if you've made lamellar like that, you've also been down the road of thinking you have enough scales. And then you put it together and you're like, oh, I just need another 75.
It's
But
very
yeah, so I
deceptive.
tooled the belt and all that sort of thing, and that was when I really started trying to put forth a nightly appearance, and and you know also demonstrate a little bit of diversity, make my own stuff and things like that. We had always made our own stuff to a certain extent out of necessity, if nothing else. But then, I was not trying to make just get me on the field munitions grade stuff anymore. um, that's
Okay, wait,
another
I have to
picture
say
with,
something about that picture before we go on. That is like the
sure,
closest thing I've ever seen to like an SCA headshot ever. Like,
right?
yes.
So that,
Beautiful.
that picture was taken by a good friend of mine, um, who actually, I think that she was in high school at the time, and she like that was her final project or whatever, and she got an A because of the lighting in that photo. And that's what I really like about it, is the line down the nose, and just the fact that it's black and white already, and then has that sort of uh, dichotomy, as it were.
Yeah,
It's a
it's
good photo.
beautiful.
That's more brotherhood. It's a funny thing because, for instance, all the way on the right, the scrawny lad in the red, that's Duke Ulrich when he was 16 or something like that, and he just started fighting. And so he got to travel that same path as a lot of us did in that respect. But one of the big differences, and this is something I did want to talk about, is when I came up, Rothgar and I, we had a enormous peer group, right? There were all these kids who were joining the SCA at the same time. And that's one of the things that made it so awesome, right? We had the people that we shared the experiences with and vied against in our home groups, and then when would go to other kingdoms and stuff like that. Once again, massive groups of young people. Um, Ulrich is a badass and has had an incredible journey, but in some ways he walked his path largely alone, because his peer group, the dudes or uh, women, girls, whatever, of his age, were, you could count them like this. And so uh, it's a thing that I'm thankful for, that the SCA was so huge at the time. Um, there are a lot of reasons for that. One of them being the culture at the time, music and media and all that stuff was a little more conducive to what we do, or what we did at the time, at least. Um, and there's also the fact that people didn't know of all the other things that there were to do if you didn't want to play football, basketball, or baseball, right? Because the whole X Games culture had not developed yet. So people were not aware of all the other weird stuff they could do. And so we kind of got a lot of people because of that. You know, all the, I mean, how many athletes are there in among the the murder of Duke's interviews that were college athletes who didn't go on? I mean, there are a couple here and there, like Glenn Parker, who was King of Kaid with Johan, who actually played pro football successfully and all that. But there's so many uh, sort of mid-range athletes who ended up in the SCA because it was competitive, you know, and it was awesome.
Right.
So this is a picture of Slane on the far right in her second suit of armor when she finally got her first Richard helmet. And then, of course, the lady in the middle was my queen and wife at the time. Her name is Kendra. Her SCA name is Keelan. And she, like I said, she was an AOA queen, but she did an incredible job. There was one of the midwinter events or something like that where basically Aitenvelt sent their heraldic bardic assassin. He's one of the whiskey bards. I can't remember his name. He's the skinny one. And of course, he went out and did this sort of Shakespearean assault on the Outlands and besmirched us and so on and so forth. And essentially, because we had split up, I was going to an event in a different part of the kingdom, and Kendra was sitting there doing her thing for the first time alone, and she basically laughed it off and said, "Oh, that was very entertaining," and kind of burst his bubble, sent him packing. It was great. She was well beloved after that. That was back in the days where Estrellas were almost warm. Sometimes. That one was actually fairly rainy, but certainly nothing compared to my last rain. I don't know if you guys went to Estrella 2 years ago.
At the mud bog.
Well, well, it was a bonding experience, you know. There were some some relationships formed that way. And it was awful. My army was decimated, and really it was because I was seeking immortality. As I had stated earlier, I was going mad, and the reason I was going mad is because actually we had heard from people I suspect in Aitenvelt through spy networks that the key to immortality was Quicksilver. And so I had started taking the Quicksilver, and apparently the gods didn't think that there needed to be any more immortals, and struck me and my army down at Estrella. So that was unfortunate.
So, Shaxi, are you flipping the?
I am, and it's not flipping, is it?
No, we're still looking at the same photo.
She was enthralled by my story.
No, I just was wondering because it looked like she was doing something, but I'm like,
Sorry.
it's
I gotta
okay.
say, the Estrella was a complete disaster, but it was a really good thing because while I joked about the fact that, you know, it was a bonding experience and all that sort of thing, it was amazing how people came together. I'm sure that you have both been in situations like that before at events where things got terrible and, you know, people helped each other out as best they could. And it was one of those things that is a reminder of why we do this, you know.
Yeah, the weekend
relationships we form
yeah
are
yeah
amazing.
I was gonna say the weekend my husband got knighted, he got hit a little too hard on the buffet and we had to go to the hospital, Um, and we had to go home because he didn't have any short-term memory anymore. And people packed up all
Wow.
our stuff for us, brought it back to us. I mean, they did everything. And you don't really realize what extensive network you have of people willing to do stuff like that for you until something happens like that. But
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I so one of the things that Rothgar also mentioned along the way was when I got bit by the Black Widow. So we're at this event that was an Outlands 8 about war, and it was basically along the Continental Divide. And so that's roughly, an hour, hour and a half east of Gallup, New Mexico. And we were camped at the top of this hill. I had my tunic hanging in a tree. I put the tunic on, and they're really bad gnats. So I got bit, and I thought it was one of the vicious gnats, and so I swatted it, and it bit me again, and I swatted it, and so basically I got bit 3 or 4 times, and um, was hanging out with a bunch of tough guys, and so the leader of our group of tough guys was, well, just give you an antihistamine, my man, and you'll be fine. Just tough it out. So I walked all the way down this giant hill down to the medic station, and they watched my vitals for a bit, and there was no real change. So they decided I was okay. So I walked back up the giant hill, and by the time I got to the top of the hill, the poison was already starting to take effect. And what that does is it like makes your muscles cramp up, right? Their utmost. And so basically, I went and laid down and thought I was going to be strong, and then about maybe an hour later, it was like, "Oh my God, Kevin, please take me to the hospital." And so we jumped in Kevin's car and we started driving as fast as the thing would go. And I'm writhing around in the front seat, and of course, pretty sure Kevin thought I was gonna die, and so did I. So we finally get Gallup to the hospital. We go in, I get admitted and all this stuff, and it turns out that's the hospital for the Native Americans, and I'm in the wrong place. So they kick me out, send me across the street. Long story short, they eventually send back to the Native American hospital for the antidote, and I get better. But while I was while I was away, they packed up my stuff. There was a donation that was circulated, pass the hat kind of a thing to help me pay for the hospital and all that. I was a deadbeat 20-year-old stick jock,
Yeah.
working construction. And so that was one of the many examples of when DSCA has come together and helped me out. And I talked about the journey I've had with Slain. One of the things that was an incredible thing was that after I came back, that's my knight Richard in the middle in a picture from his knighting.
Wow.
It's kind of funny because he's wearing that suit of plate which he made because he's an armorer, which is beautiful, but he is not that guy. He is a dark age dude. um, but like when I came back from my sort of self-imposed exile after stepping down as Baron, nobody treated me badly. Nobody. Uh, I, Once again, it was a situation where the only person really that was criticizing or judging me was me. Everybody else kind of was like, "Well, uh, so some life happened there for you, huh, bud? Did you learn from your mistakes?" That's more me, young knight. See, there were a couple of things I was thinking about when I have been watching the other interviews. Um, Duke Gareth came up in conversation with one of the things I was talking about or one of the things I was watching the other day, and he was one of the guys that really helped me turn the corner as well. met him at a Lily's, I think, at one point first, but then we were at Penzic not too long after that. And at the time, I was fighting Senator Brown, and with my sword just basically in front of my face, just behind the shield. And I hadn't met anybody yet that I couldn't block their flat snap. Well, Gareth uh, was really frustrating because he just flat snapped me over and over and over because he's incredibly fast. Um, and it was just in pickup fights, and he was like, "Hey, man, check this thing out." And he said, "Hey, go to high guard against people like me," and I did. And then I ended up facing him in the rock involved ribbon tourney later in the day, and and actually ended up beating him. And it was only because he showed me how to beat him, or at least how to block a flat snap from high guard, which is something that probably should have occurred to me. That one's slain again, Loke. So one of the things also that I have been thinking about a lot, especially in regards to watching the interviews that you've done, and also a little bit of the journey that I've had since I came back. I talked about asking Sean advice. Really, what I asked him initially was when I was going to start training was like, "Hey, man, so you're about the same age as me. What kind of exercises do you do to maintain your body?" And that's when he told me just throw last shots. And then, the light bulb went off and all that stuff. And I watched all his videos and so on and so forth. But Alberon, where we were brought up, didn't really have so much of a sharing of knowledge training culture. Is more like a heightened awareness through pain induction. You better learn to block that kind of tough love learning system. And I learned from some greats, but it was mostly through error, not as much through instruction. Probably the guy that was as much responsible for my success and probably my bread and butter shot is a guy named Lee Jackson, or More Luck the Merciless, with Amp guy, who actually turns out More Luck the Merciless knighted Johan in Amp the Black Duke, right? So anyway, uh, they had this like Iverson kind of helicopter shot, right? I have a offside body that I throw, and basically I just kind of chopped off the beginning part, the tell, before the offside body. But the point that I was going to make is that it's an amazing and wonderful thing that we have not only the means but the mentality now to really share. And Sean's been incredible for that. But as I've watched the many things, I also learned that Branos is great, and there's so many people out there sharing their information. Um, that man, that the technology of fighting is immensely developed since when I started, of course, and just even in the last five, well, since 5 years even, it just keeps getting better. I like this shot a lot because it's a decent picture of she and I, but if you see in the bottom left, there's a picture of His Grace Martino when he was King of Callantyr, and he's a person that was he wasn't in the Brotherhood, but he was one of those guys who always hung out with us when we were youngsters and uh, rowdy young men, and he's got a pretty interesting journey too. You guys should talk to him at some point.
Cool. I'm writing him down.
But I don't have a pen.
If I was going to nominate somebody else, there's a few people on my list, but there's this guy named Duke Kane from Meridies. You ever hear of him?
Is it Kane?
I think it's either Kane or just Cain. But so yeah, he has a Tigger on his shield, and it was Duke Kane and Duchess List, and I met them at my first Lilies, and I think that they would have fun stories to tell.
All right, cool. I'm gonna look them up.
Yeah, that's been one of the great things too, is just hearing everybody's stories, man. So many stories. Like, everybody, it seems like, has a Tamiki story. So my Tamiki stories are, the first time I saw him was at my first Lily. He was fighting Florentine from his back. And he weighed probably almost 300 pounds, and his name was Gui. um, and then I came back not too long after that, and he had won crown tournament and so on and so forth. And of course, he was amazing. And one of my most epic fighting memories is we were at Pennsic in the open field, and Kevin and I, a couple other guys, had been hired by uh, King Roderick and Callantyre at the time to support his royal guard. We were Roderick's rescue rangers, and so anyway, we were getting decimated in the open field. We were just getting crushed. I saw that we were gonna implode, as it were, and I kind of turtled up and just started grinding my way out. And I get all the way out to the edge and start running down the hill because I see that our king, Iroh, is having pickups with Stefan of Bellatrix at the time. And I know that it's being videotaped. And in those days, there was no videotape of any fighting. So I went down there to get on camera. So I strung out all these guys, they chased me down there. I killed them. And when I was going back up to get more guys to bring down in front of the camera, I saw Tamiki. And Tamiki at the time, he was wearing the big red drape thing. And he was fighting sword and shield. But out where I was, the guys were like maybe 10, 15 feet apart. Tamiki was in many ranks deeper where the guys were about like, kind of arms width apart. And he was just in there whirling through them with his red head thing flowing. And oh my God, it was one of the most beautiful, violent things I've ever seen in my life. And yeah, Tamiki is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Um, I have beaten him once in the last 30 years or something like that. I There was a tournament where I beat him at Lily's, but it was really, I think, only because I made this helmet. It was 12 gauge steel and then 12 gauge brass, and it was a Spongen helm, and it actually weighs more than a guy helm. It's back there somewhere, but pretty sure that in a any other helm, I probably would have felt the wrap that he hit me with, and not one. But hey, that was the first helmet I made, so I think you guys have talked about, that's my squire at the time, Devin Drakeson. He is now got short hair, and he's a knight and a firefighter and a hero among men. Uh, Definitely looks better with short hair. But that's a picture from Lily.
Have all your squires been knighted?
All two of them, yeah.
Okay, so it's just been Slain in him.
Yeah, honestly, not out of a sense of nobility or anything like that. I just was not ever comfortable with the idea of being in charge of another person in that measure. And so Devin had to chase me down, and that was
Slain had
not
to make
fair
you
to
a
him.
belt.
Well, yeah, it wasn't fair to him how hard it was that I was to be convinced. He's a good dude. And same thing with Slain. She convinced me, but unfortunately, in both those cases, they were not people that I needed to help mature or um, help them to become better people, because they're doing just fine in that respect on their own, you know. I wish I could have taught them more about fighting because they're both good fighters, but I'm not a good teacher. um,
What are we looking at here?
Oh, sorry.
oh, let's see. That one was low lounging in the chair. The banner on the right is our household banner. That's the Brotherhood of the Bengal. It's really Jax's household, but he lets us hang out, which is cool. Um, then that one is a picture of my first coronation. That's Hogarton handing me the crown. Um, so Hogarton preceded me, and it was right when, fortunately, he was getting ready to move. He had done an enormous amount for the Outlands, not only just in reigning well, but he had done a bunch of really cool projects, did a bunch of stuff with the Knights lineage and many other things. So anyway, I thought he needed a token of my and the kingdom's esteem. This is one of my epic blunders, and you're gonna probably, when I say this, be amazed that I was so stupid. But nonetheless, so uh, I had already commissioned new signet rings to be made for the kingdom because the ones we had were old and getting kind of fragile. So I consulted with some people, a trusted peer in my own house, no less, who I shall not name. And the person smiled the big toothy grin and said, "Oh, I think that's a good idea." And so I gave Hogarton the king's signet ring in court before he moved. Um, and though it may surprise you, there are some people that were really pissed off about it. um, so there are a few people who basically like, no, you have to get it back, blah, 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 blah. So Hogarth had moved to Texas. Hogarth is a huge D&D nerd, and he has a lot of figures and a lot of terrain. And they moved down to a tiny little place with a tiny little storage unit. So basically, a ring was somewhere in with his D&D stuff in the storage unit, and he spent weeks mining for it while I was getting my ass kicked by the peers of the realm, and finally got it back, and uh, sort of all was right with the world again. Although it's kind of ironic because one of the big things that people were incensed about was that they thought it was the first signet ring of the Outlands, and it wasn't. That one had already been auctioned off.
Oh no! So they didn't keep it for historical reasons anyway. They had auctioned it off anyway. The one before it.
Well, I mean, they was bought by a peer of the realm and somebody who had attachment to it. So this terrible picture is Jax and I at Lily's War when we were, probably 22 and very skinny. I think that this is the one where we had a class 2 tornado and it wiped out the entire encampment. And so I think we would like eating chips we scavenged and drinking warm tequila out of the bottle. And
Wow.
so Johan has been a really interesting character in my journey as well, because when I first started, uh, he was like the classic older brother, bully, take your stuff, beat you up, mess up your hair, whatever the thing. Um, and like I said, Alberon was kind of a little bit of a tough love kind of place, and he was working his way up to deserving the title Black Duke. So he was kind of a villain slash uh, rival in the beginning. Although, of course, he was a much greater fighter than I, and so less rival, more bully older brother. But eventually, after Jackson and I were knighted and stuff, he then joined the Brotherhood. He was one of the earlier people who joined after after we kind of got the ball rolling. He he was the first guy, like I remember in the park, who just flat snapped me and flat snapped me and flat snapped until I was basically so frustrated as I was about to explode. And the lesson there was uh, control yourself. Don't get mad. You're gonna get hit. It's part of the game. I mean, sure, he's being kind of a dick and smashing you in the head over and over instead of saying, "Hey, if you pick up that corner, you'll block that." But Johan also has been a vast supporter of mine. When I was pretty young, hot fighter, he was king and he blew out his knee. And in those days at Estrella, the Kings got an invitation to the Silver Dollar tournament, which was a big deal. And he offered me his spot in the tournament as a squire. And of course, I went down to the field that day and they're like, no fucking way are we going to let you in. For the reasons that you don't let a squire into that tournament, which I didn't understand at the time, but I've come to realize they were totally right about. Um, they would have just smoked me. I mean, that was the first place I saw Torgal fight, right? So incredible fighters in this tournament, and I was pretty good and pretty quick and all that, but I was not that class at all. And I'm sure that if I had run across, Trelawn or somebody like that, that I would have ended up throwing my helmet and making a scene at some point. So it all worked out for the best. That's Earl Cameron in the center. I think that was maybe when King, he made me a Thane, which is our grant level fighting award that was kind of patterned after Callanteer's Huskarl. Cameron was basically my sword brother after Rothgar and before Jax. Rothgar, right after, well, Rothgar went to college and stuff. And so right about 88, 89, I started hanging out with Cameron because Kevin was down in Socorro most of the time. And Cameron and I did some amazing things. We went and fought the Two Chucks one year on Two Chuck Hill, and he's he's probably one of the most beautiful fighters I've ever seen. He won his first crown, and uh, life took him another direction. He's one of those guys who could have done it many times, though, for sure. He's Iverson. He was Leif Iverson's squire, one of them. So this that's me with my back turned, and then the gentleman facing us with the red shield is Jarl Gunvald Gulbjorn, and he was my arch nemesis. As much as I have hated him at some points, he made me strong and made me tough and taught me some good lessons. But oh my God, he punished me along the way. There was one time. You remember when the metal Keons came out with the welded ones with the ball on the end, right? Well,
Yep.
there were two sets. There was a short set, and then there was the big long set that stuck out way past your hands. Well, that was back in the days where I didn't wear body armor, really. And I didn't have the sternum protection thing, so I was on my knees, and he, I'm sure inadvertently, punched me in the chest with the Keons, and it separated my sternum to where it it would pop for probably 5 years after that. When I would do that, it would go, and we had many a go round.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, when the week after uh, Estrella, when Johnny offered me the spot in the silver dollar tournament, the next weekend we're at the park. Goonball comes up and he says, "I've never been offered a spot in the silver dollar tournament. I want to see what you got." And then he tried to kill me for like the next half hour all over the park. One of the cool things among the many in my journey, Goonball has had some fine sons. One of which is a knight and a baron, and ironically shares my birthday, Martin Dodd, um, who I end up was the guy that I fought in the finals of my second crown. So story after story seems to come full circle.
Yeah. Definitely.
Let's see. That's
So we
Richard
look at that
again.
one.
I think we've looped the pictures at this point.
Yeah,
We've looked at them all.
unfortunately,
I think so.
next time you guys interview me, I will be ready.
But you're very
Um,
ready. You've had all these stories at the ready, and so
well, I got to say I've been thinking about this for quite a while because I was really honored to be asked. Although I got to say, I also really feel like you got put on the spot.
I
I don't know if
totally
you remember.
didn't. I totally didn't.
No, she's lying. So the way I remember the story is that I helped out Duke Johann with his interview with some technical aspects and stuff, and we did it at my house, and they were chatting afterwards, and Johnny said something to the effect of, "Oh yeah, well Duke Hrorek, blah blah blah," and he's a Duke, and Duke Hrorek, and and
It's
so
the
then
after
you're
the
like,
silver dollar tourney, it's the
so
second best thing he's thrown you into.
so would you? Well said. Thank you for having me.
That's how these interviews have gone. It's been our journey with the interviews has been, hey, you guys should interview this
Right.
person. And it's just gone from person to person to person, and it's been awesome.
It has. I was really one of the first ones I watched after, of course, Jax and Casca, um, was Christopher of Hodens because, like Rothgar, he gave me my AOA, and he, I always thought that he was such a gentleman and uh, the embodiment of grace in so many ways. It was funny because I put the word out that I was looking for photos, and I got a bunch of photos. And so remember how he was talking about his shield with ventilation? He had initially been doing the Polish wing, it was called at the time, and so that's basically a heater with a wing on the side so you don't get flat snapped, right? And then they added another one to the other side, right? And then Christopher was talking about how he was getting
Thrusted in
thrust
the
in the
face.
face right down the alley. So he made a little
Great.
in the center, and there's a great picture of Arton somewhere in there uh, when he's a Duke already, but he has one of that generation of the three-pointed shields. He had one, Kathan had one, uh, Johan had one. It was the thing at the time.
I was gonna say they need to put a middle finger in it, right?
uh,
Well, have we not covered something that you would like to cover? I don't think we really asked you like what your favorite part of reigning was or anything like that. Do you want to sort of touch on that for a sec?
um, my favorite part of raining. Um, well, the first time uh, I was bent on being the good guy. Um, I'd always been kind of associated with strong households and that were bad boys. We were always getting in trouble for one thing or another. Um, anyway, my first reign, I made a real effort to sort of separate from the household and be the goodest. And I know the what I'm saying, the goodest king I could be, right? So the second time, um, I did not try and do that at all. Of course, um, I think pretty much as anybody does, especially people who've done this twice, you realize that it's service, right? You are a representative of the people. So of course you always are trying to do it as well as you can, both for their sake and for your own, to have your life be less painful, right? But I also got crazy. I did all sorts of weird stuff my second reign. I One of the things I had always talked about one of my buddies with was that when I was made king, that I was going to have the song Tyrant, this priest, played at my coronation. And I didn't do it my first time because that would have been madness as a first time. So um, at this last time, I had somebody who was a friend essentially perform a period rendition of it, so to speak. We had this whole theme where that so Slane's guards women were called the Iron Maidens, right? So our whole reign had this crazy metal theme to it, and so all my guardsmen were metal album titles or metal song titles, but translated into Norse. Like there were the Men of War for Man of War, and there was the Trooper, and there was the anyway. So I did all this crazy metal related stuff, and that's why I ended up being in the end the metal god. I mean the metal god, the metal duke, and so that was pretty fun. I had a lot of time, a lot of fun with the shtick. I realized when I was king the first time, and of course a couple other knighthood related experiences, that I suck as a public speaker if I try and memorize things. But if I just sort of bullet point it and have touch points and speak from the cuff and the heart, as it were, then I did okay. And so I really enjoyed the theatrics the second reign. Um, so I would have to say that would be the favorite part of reigning, without saying giving awards, because not only is that truly the best part, but it's also what everybody else has said, you know, because it is. I mean, from the AOA to the peerage, you know, and one of the things that's I think a mark of a reign is the peers you make. I have also had the great fortune to make some great peers. I, Slane and I made Bela a pelican, right? We've got some good accomplishments under our belts in that regard.
I guess the question should really be, what's the second best part of raining, right?
The second best part of reigning.
Second best part. So did you bring a sword? Are we gonna look at your sword, or are we gonna just go into the 10?
Yeah, I have a couple here. I've always been one of those multi-weapons guys. So I have. Oh wait, I'm gonna steal a page out of Arius's book here because I thought that was so badass when he did it. So of course, when you asked him what his killing weapon was, he brought out his lightsaber. So this is actually a lightsaber that was made for me by my heir. I did a bunch of Star Wars shtick at the end because his coronation was May the 5th, right? So anyway, but this is made out of steel pipe, and I would take it over Arius's in a fight. But other than that, I have a two-handed sword over there I may show you because I really like greatsword a lot. It's the most beautiful style, I think. As far as a single sword kind of a thing, I use about a 36-inch sword. I playing the edges of the handle now, at least. I used to swing a much bigger sword, not like Johann big, but like half that. And had a metal hilt and all that. And basically, the mechanics of the shots and the swords were all based around the heavy hilt and the fulcrum, right 2 inches in front of the hilt and all that sort of thing. But when I came back the last time, I was fighting guys like Ulrich and some of the fast young knights in our household, Stavros and things like that. I realized that um, I just wasn't as successful as I wanted to be, and so I started fighting with the same kind of sticks as they did, and I found that I still have plenty of power because of the equation. And so it's been working out. But I do a trigger that is, I like I start with a 2 in, 1 over. So basically 2 fingers into the trigger, and then my index or my pointer finger locks them in. And then what always happens is they slide and stretch, and then they become a 3 in, 1 over trigger. I do have a inline thrusting tip. I didn't use one for the longest time. I thought that I wanted to be a bladesman, but once again, thrusting is something that a lot of successful fighters do, and it helped me a lot too. I always have some fire stuff on me for long, on my edging or things like that.
I was going to point that out because my sister and I
Melvin
have this
and
thing about flames.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I've had the flame thing going for quite a while. It was kind of my signature after after I joined the Brotherhood. I kind of adopted it, but because I'm not like the most period guy, I like to look good but I'm a stick jock. So one of my nicknames was Hot Rod because of the flames and the checkies like NASCAR and stuff. And
I think it's important to have some whimsy. I mean, we are fighting with rattan with duct tape on it. So if you can use a little bit of whimsical duct tape, I think it's all good.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and see, there's also all kinds of stuff like that. For instance, I also have an enormous amount of orange stuff now. I don't like orange. Our our buddy Loke was from Tennessee. He's the Duke à l'Orange, and so when he passed, I bought a bunch of his stuff and I started wearing orange pants. And so when you see me on the field, I will always be wearing orange pants now, and it's just accumulated and accumulated over the years. All this orange stuff.
So
But
I'm looking
part of
at
that
that breastplate back there. You got to tell me about that breastplate because it's gorgeous.
Thank you. That is, I made that. Well, Jax is a Roman persona, right? And I was asked to be his champion, so I figured I should make some Roman stuff. And so I went to Casca's shop, and we made that together. And actually, I've made helmets, but I'd never done a whole lot of shaping in that regard. And it was incredible. It was such a pleasure to work with. Someday Costco will have to tell you what the metal was. I think it was 5052 or something. It's aluminum, but it was lighter than I would have used. I at least instinctively, but it work hardened beautifully. The timbre of it changed like a couple octaves, once it was all done. And so I would have thought that it would be too. I thought the aluminum would have been light, but it work hardened so much that it's not. And so I made that for Jax's ring, and then I wore it. The first time I wore it, actually, pretty often. It was the first day.
52.
What's that?
Casca says 50-52 metal.
5052. Yeah.
You have some
So the
beautiful
first
curves.
time I wore it, I'm sorry, what?
I just was saying, like you got some beautiful curves in there. You did a really nice job.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. Did you notice I made it sort of like a mature
Yeah,
musculata? It doesn't have a whole full six pack.
got a little pony cake down there.
Right. Um, so the first time I wore it, actually in battle, was at Estrella, and it was in the open field, and it turned out to be unfortunately a really awful experience. And so the next day I switched back to my old armor, and I didn't wear it for quite a while.
It's one of those things that maybe you have to like put something underneath so that you don't.
Well,
Yeah.
it's the bad experience I had was basically um, maybe I was getting hit in it and I didn't
Oh,
feel it,
okay. So
or
opposite.
or maybe I'm invincible and too mighty to have been struck by His Majesty Aenvelt or
Oops.
his many guardsmen. So basically, I charged into the Aenvelt Royal Guard and they beat me down. And I wasn't mad when I walked off, but they were mad. And I didn't realize who I was talking to when Merrick said, "Hey, buddy, you sure got a lot of hit points." And I said, "Well, yeah, you too." As I was kind of walking off, and of course, Merrick and Jax are really good buddies, and so what a fucking horrible way to start off Astray as your best friend's champion.
With your magic armor.
Your magic armor.
Right? I'm sure the guy helm served me well in that regard too, because
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
stout.
Funny. All right.
Yeah. Good
Well,
times.
let's do the final 10.
Okay.
What event have you never gone to that you would like to go to?
Oh man, Gulf Wars is definitely on that list, and then of course anything in Drakkenwald after that. I mean, really listening to people once again, it sounds like there's so many great events out there to go to. I haven't been to a Great Western um, in a very long time, if nothing else. I think it was called Treasure Box War when I went or something.
Ooh, you're dating
My mom
yourself.
says I'm talking for a long time, so we need to wrap this up. Okay?
We are wrapping it up. We only have 9 more questions. I promise. If you could fight anyone
They're
in the
all
world, who
sleeping
would
in
it
their
be?
chairs. If I could fight anyone in the world, who would it be? I thought about this one, and either it would be my dad, but he doesn't play SCA, so it would be my dad if he had my skills as well, because he's an amazing man, and I think highly of him and his accomplishments, and I would love to really be able to share with him the thing that I'm best at in my life. Not that he doesn't appreciate me and what I do. It's just like he doesn't understand how good I am at this game, right? Which is super important to me. And then the other answer I would say would be I would want to fight myself.
I
I
think
can't.
you're the first person that said that. So
Well, wouldn't you want to fight young you and see how that went?
I actually, now that you say that, I think it would be kind of cool to fight yourself, because then you'd actually know how hard you're hitting and like what's
Right.
working and what's not working, and you could adjust it, because you don't know, like you never know, right? Because you never
Right.
feel yourself
Well,
hit anything. So.
and I don't know about your journey, but you were probably not a young, I mean, I'm just guessing, you're probably not a volatile hothead.
Oh, I was a bit of a hothead.
Okay, so imagine that dichotomy where like young you, who is, treated unjustly always and nobody takes their shots and so on and so forth, has to fight like young me fighting Duke Hrorek. Now, I'm sure young me would have been unsatisfied, to say the least.
Yes. Yeah, we don't have to get into my hotheadedness, but I've been there. I can relate.
But other than that, I've also not gotten to fight Uther, and I've not gotten to fight Branos, and so on and so forth. So those guys after me and my dad.
Cool. What's your favorite Estrella story, or have you already told us it?
Ooh, favorite Estrella story. I don't know. Probably there are a bunch. One of the coolest things that I've ever seen was Jax getting into the castle. I don't know how he did it, but all of a sudden he was in there, and it was one of those things where everybody who was inside the castle was back off the wall, so they couldn't be got from the spears, and somehow Jax got there and was running down the line, killing every third or fourth person, and the cheer went up from the crowd, and it was grand. But the old days of Estrella, when they had the broken field area, which you may have heard about, just arroyos and sagebrush and dust and uh, disregard for rules and safety, and
My knight used to tell me stories where you could actually like fight in little canyons and stuff.
Yeah,
And, it was
I've jumped off arroyos onto people and had it done.
yeah, before my time.
Right.
All right, who are your favorite people to watch fight?
Mm. Oh, Tamiki's one for sure. Um, Rothgar's kind of fun to watch too, although not as flashy. There are a lot. I gotta say though, Tamiki is definitely the person who has done the most physically amazing things I've ever seen. At Lonely Mountain one year, he was out visiting, and they were doing some pickups, and he and Rothgar are fighting. He legged Rothgar, and he's standing in front of Kev. And this is, I think Kev may have already been a Duke. He was certainly a Count already, but very, very accomplished. And Tamiki is standing in front of him, squared up, in both legs kind of parallel, and jumped in the air, landed on his 2 feet, threw a shot behind him, and hit Kevin in the ribs with his back edge or his front edge, and then sprung back to his original position in 2 beats. Boom, boom. Like you would throw uh, a 1-2 combination. Boom, boom. Right? But that guy, holy moly.
Yeah, I made the mistake of saying I would have loved to see them back in the day. They're still here, so yeah. So yeah, I've another thing Tamiki can do is he can get so low, like you never expect him to get that low, and he just does. He's incredible.
Yeah, well, like I said, the first time I saw him, he was fighting Florentine from his back.
Yeah,
right? He was legged, but I don't know if he covered it. He used to have a pretty interesting Pell kind of workout routine with a clothesline. If you ever have a chance, ask him about that.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a hero or a mentor in the SCA, and if so, who is it?
Oh, man. Too many heroes to list. Of course, Richard, my knight, changed my world as far as SCA view goes, and was also just the epitome of how to conduct oneself. Helpful, considerate, chivalrous, all the things you want to be. Guy's another. Jax is another. Casca. I mean, I really liked Sirith's thing about crossing the road, and I'm bummed out that I didn't meet a bunch of those people and have them be more a part of my life earlier. People like Casca and things like that. But on the other hand, man, one of the great parts of my journey, especially, was my villains and my rivalries, and being able to go to Estrella and have hard fights with those was good for me, and it was good for them, and it's I'm sad for those who don't have that.
But now you can have those hard fights and then go and have a beer, right? So
yeah, absolutely, and not just like take it, in a surly fashion, but thank God.
All right. If you had to recommend one event in the Outlands for someone out of Kingdom to go to, what would it be?
Mm, these days, Battlemore. Um, Outlandish is still a really cool thing, and it's a big part of our history with the Lord of Outlandish tournament and stuff like that. But Battlemore is something that we're trying to stay focused on as a kingdom, if nothing else, to have an inner kingdom event we where we can host and show everybody a good time.
What is
And
your favorite medieval-esque
it's
or period movie?
well, I thought about this one a lot too, and I have interpreted the question somewhat loosely. I'll give you my pantheon here is actually The Last King, which is just really cool. It has a bunch of Vikings skiing in it, which I think is super cool, and I love it aesthetically. Then there's Flesh and Blood, not a very popular choice because of some of the content. Um, there's Princess Bride, right? Everybody loves Princess
Classic.
Bride. Army of Darkness. You said period-esque.
At work?
Um, Big Trouble in Little China. This is the one I really wanted to say but it was just too far out to be considered period-esque. But this movie was hugely influential in my group of guys. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but the Brotherhood salute is that, which is from the movie. But number one all time, even though it was a tough choice, is The Man Who Would Be King. Sean Connery, Michael Caine, adaptation of a Rudyard Kipling story. So a little bit on the outside edge, but uh, it makes me cry every time.
Very cool. All right. If you could change one thing about the SCA, what would it be?
Simple answer, it's accessibility. I don't have the complex answer to that, unfortunately. Uh, One of the reasons I had such a large peer group when I was growing up is because the SCA was cheaper to play. Part of that being a factor of our expectations, and part of it just being a social economic thing. But when it comes down to it, we're aging and shrinking, which are mostly considered to be bad things, and we may have a really unforeseen opportunity presented us here with the conditions facing now, but we accessibility has to be the thing that we address and conquer for us to grow, because it's been really cool to see the game mature and have people mature as it does, and see the way it changed, the way it was played change. People travel and put more money into their kids and all that sort of thing, but um, it's also become pretty elitist, and I'm not for that.
No, we need more grace with people who want to be a part of it, and we need to give them grace to be a part of it without having the 20 years and the 6-figure income. So anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
what is your favorite in kingdom tradition?
That's a really hard one too. We have some really neat traditions in the Outlands, from the baby knights chain, where when each person is knighted, they add a link to the chain, and then of course the newest knight carries the chain until they they have the chance to pass it on. We have some things like, of course, it's a tradition that uh, nobody who is a non-belt touches the sword of state, with the bare hand. I mean, fealty is something aside, but so there'll be things like if, for instance, a non-belt should have the occasion to stand behind the throne sword, he best be wearing a set of gloves. um, God, we have so many though. The dirt. Ah, so one of the really cool things that we do is that we have a holy vessel in which is contained some of the list fields from each of the crown tournaments that has ever been fought in the Outlands, and so among other sacred secret items. But so one of the things that happens is before the tournament commences, the king essentially consecrates the tourney field with sands or dirt from all the tourney fields in the past. So that's a really cool one.
That is really cool. I don't think I've ever heard that one before. I love it. Love it. All right. And the last question.
Yeah,
what
one of
do
my
you
favorite pictures of.
go ahead?
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
One of your favorite pictures?
No. You can about those pictures all night long, but my mom wants to go to bed, so let's just
Okay.
do the last question.
Sorry, Mom. All right. What do you think is the most important trait to become a successful fighter?
Is that a long enough pause? It's perseverance. Pretty much like most of the elements of this group that you've spoken with. I got good by going to 2 to 3 practices a week for several years at a time. And so it's a physical persistence in that regard, and then there's also just the wanting something bad enough to deal with some painful things, whether it be emotional or philosophical or your butt cheeks. The one thing I was going to say, I don't know if you're going to get to this question or not, but you've been asking what books I would recommend for the path to knighthood, and Hogarton stole my answer when he said Once and Future King, but I would say the Osprey Man-at-Arms series.
Oh, that's a good series. It really is.
Because that was the other thing that was one of the ways Richard changed our world. He was like, here, look at these books.
Yeah, I think when people come in sort of newish and they're looking to like put something cohesive together, it's just so good to throw a whole bunch of those at them and say, well, what do you like? Here's what would be cohesive for this kind of period. And then you can shoot for a look, right?
Yeah, and the fact that they present both sides of the conflict usually is also quite helpful.
Yeah, I love those books. Well, thank you so much, Your Grace. It's really been a pleasure. I loved looking at all your pictures, and all your stories were great. So thank you.
Thanks for
my pleasure indeed. Thank you very much.
All right, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Work with the pictures.
Yeah, and I'm sorry it was so lame. I wish I'd done a better job.
I'm glad that we had pictures, so thank you very much, Ashaxi.
Well, like I said, next time.
On Wednesday, Ashaxi and I will be talking to Sir Lachlan from Ontir, who is a character and just a very considerate and emotional guy who's sort of an anchor in the kingdom, and so that should be probably pretty moving, I think.
But also one of the guys that really knows how to bring the fun.
Yeah, he really does.
It's not surface fun. It's got a deep root. So, yeah.
Right.
Tomorrow on Grace Under Pressure is Duchess Miranda from Ontir. And Wednesday for Branch of Laurels, I have Linda Birch Kerrigan from, I think, Atlantia, who is a combat bardic, which is kind of a cool thing. So
I never even heard of that. So
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time. And thanks again, Your Grace. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Night.
Good night.